Picture a boundless steppe under a sky so vast it swallows your breath, a golden temple shimmering like a mirage, and a figure in saffron robes stepping onto the hard earth of Russia. Oh, how the heart leaps at such a vision. They say Vladimir Putin, that steely colossus of a man, flung open the gates of Kalmykia in 2004 and 2012, inviting the Dalai Lama to sit with him and unravel the silken threads of Buddhism's wisdom. What a dream that would be! A ruler and a monk, two souls peering into the abyss of existence together. But no, friends, it's a tale that never took root in the soil of truth. The real story is messier, more human, more achingly beautiful, and, oh, so much more tragic. Let's step back to November 29, 2004, when the Dalai Lama, that gentle exile with laughter etched into his weathered face, touched down in Kalmykia for a fleeting 36 hours. Was it Putin's hand that beckoned him? No. It was a wild, improbable dreamer named Kirsan Ilyumshinov, a man who saw chessboards in the stars and Buddha's light in the ruins of his people's past, who rolled out the prayer flags and dared to summon holiness to Alista. This wasn't Moscow's grand gesture, not a Kremlin trumpet call echoing across the nation. No, it was Kalmykia, that tiny Buddhist ember glowing on Europe's edge, crying out from the margins of Russia's sprawling East Seoul. The Burkhan Bakshin Altan Sum, a temple forged from the ashes of Soviet oppression, stood proud and golden, awaiting its blessing. Thousands gathered, monks in crimson, families with wind-chapped faces, children clutching prayer beads, their eyes alight with a hope that had survived Stalin's iron fist, the deportation of an entire people in 1943, the razing of their sacred places. Can you feel it, friends? Their trembling joy, the wind across the steppe carrying prayers buried for decades under snow and silence? The wound is the place where the light enters you, Rumi whispers in our ears, and for Kalmykia, scarred by history's brutal hand, that wound blazed with light that day. The Dalai Lama smiled. Oh, that smile. And his presence was a balm, a fleeting taste of something eternal. But Putin? He sat far off in Moscow, 1,000 miles from Alista's sacred dust, his mind tangled in pipelines and power plays. Not the fleeting dance of karma or the still waters of compassion. The foreign ministry, those gray-suited gatekeepers, nodded. Yes to the visit, but with gritted teeth and a nervous glance eastward. Keep it short, keep it local, they hissed, their voices trembling under China's watchful gaze. This wasn't a summit of souls, no fireside chat where a president and a monk might ponder the meaning of suffering or the illusion of self. It was a pastoral pause, a fragile gift snatched from the jaws of geopolitics, a moment where Kalmykia could breathe free before the world's chains snapped tight again. Oh, how brief it was, how fragile. Why must beauty always flirt with brevity, like a flower blooming under frost, and 2012, a mirage, a phantom hope shimmering on the horizon, only to dissolve into dust? No Dalai Lama graced Russia that year, only a silence so heavy it could crush a stone, thick with the weight of the power's cold, unyielding hand. China roared across the border, its voice a thunderclap shaking the Kremlin's walls. No visas for the monk, no welcome for the exile. And Putin, back on his throne in 2012 after a 4-year shadow dance as prime minister, shrugged. A shrug that spoke volumes, a shrug that buried dreams. Did he hear the monks of Kalmykia weeping into their robes, the pleas of Telotulku Rinpoche echoing across the windswept plains? Did he feel the ache of Buryatia's Buddhists, or Tuvas, those scattered faithful who looked to the Dalai Lama as their North Star? I doubt it. I doubt it with a heaviness that sits in my chest like a stone. Power is not a means. It is an end. Orwell warns us from the pages of history, and here it reigned supreme. Billions in trade with Beijing, Pipelines snaking east like veins of black gold drowned out the soft whispers of enlightenment. Russian Buddhists, their hearts straining across borders, turned to India instead. Pilgrims trekking to Dharamsala, the Dalai Lama's exile home, their numbers swelling with each passing year. 1,300 in 2010, 1,600 in 2011. More still as the years rolled on. Isn't it a bitter twist? A cruel jest of fate? The spirit bending, bowing, twisting under the world's petty games? Putin spoke that year, his voice cool as the permafrost that grips Siberia. He's a political figure, not just a monk. Oh, the irony sears the soul. The Dalai Lama, who preaches peace over power, who gave up his political crown in 2011 to let Tibet's voice rise anew, boxed into a cage of politics by men who fear his very breath, his laughter, his unshakable calm. What does it say of us, I ask you? What does it scream into the void of our being? That we lock wisdom out to appease ambition? I feel their loss. Friends, don't you? The raw, throbbing ache of a people denied their light, their guide, their mirror of what could be. Putin stood unmoved, a chess master on a board of nations, his pieces carved from steel and strategy, not lotus blossoms or prayer wheels. Does he dream of nirvana, I wonder? Does he lie awake at night, haunted by the Buddha's call to shed the ego, to let go of the self that clings so fiercely? Hardly. His world is one of control, of calculated nods to Russia's Buddhists, Kalmykia, Buryatia, Tuva, like a man tossing crumbs to sparrows, a gesture to keep the flock quiet, to tether their loyalty to his towering state. I've seen him pin medals on Damba Ayushiv, head of Buryatia's Sangha, in 2009, a glinting order of honor for a man who walks a tightrope between faith and fealty. I've seen him visit Tuva's monks in 2000, his boots crunching on sacred ground, but it's all theater, not faith, pageantry to bind Russia's far-flung corners to Moscow's will. Man is not what he thinks he is, but what he does, André Malraux cries across the years. And what does Putin do? He builds walls, not bridges, walls of silence, walls of denial, walls that keep the Dalai Lama's voice at bay. The Dalai Lama dared pierce that armor in 2014, his words sharp and true in a Die Welt interview. Egocentric, he called Putin, a dagger of clarity thrust into the haze, warning that Russia's hunger for power would leave it isolated, a pariah among nations. Putin's reply? More locked doors, more icy silence, no invitations, no dialogues, just a cold calculus where China's gold outweighs Kalmykia's prayers, where the clink of coins drowns out the chant of mantras. Can a man rule a nation and still hear the still, small voice within? The voice that whispers of impermanence, of compassion, of a world beyond the throne. I fear not this man, not now, not in this lifetime. Oh, but Kalmykia tears at my heart and lifts it to the sky in the same breath. Europe's only Buddhist flame, flickering in a sea of orthodoxy and pragmatism. A tiny republic of 280,000 souls, where 48% cling to the Dharma, heirs to Mongol Oirhats who carried their faith across the winds of centuries. Stalin tried to snuff it out. Can you imagine the cruelty? In 1943, he banished them, nearly the entire Kalmyk people, to Siberia's frozen wastes, accused of disloyalty in a war that wasn't theirs. Temples crumbled, monks vanished into gulags or unmarked graves, their prayer beads scattered like dust. Yet here they stand, unbowed, unbroken, a testament to the human spirit's wild, stubborn fire. The Dalai Lama's visits in 1991, 1992, and that precious, fleeting moment in 2004 were like rain on parched earth, like a mother's touch, to a child long lost. Ilyumzhinov, for all his quirks, chess master, stargazer, a man who claimed aliens whisked him to the stars, fanned that flame with a passion that defies reason. He ruled Kalmykia from 1993 to 2010. A strange shepherd who built temples alongside chess cities, who saw in the Dalai Lama not just a monk, but a bridge to something eternal. The 2004 blessing of that golden temple? It was a thunderous cry. We are still here. A shout into the void of history, a refusal to let their light be extinguished. Don't you feel their courage pierce your soul, like an arrow loosed from a bow strung with hope? But since then, a drought has settled over the steppe, a parched silence where the Dalai Lama's voice should ring. No visas, no visits, only his teachings filtering through crackling screens or carried back by pilgrims from India's Himalayan embrace. Telo Toku Rinpoche, the Supreme Lama of Kalmykia, held the torch high until 2022, when Putin's war on Ukraine broke his heart. He fled, condemning the bloodshed, leaving a void that still bleeds. The world breaks everyone, and afterward, some are strong at the broken places. Hemingway murmurs through the years, and Kalmykia's strength shines like a beacon. But oh, how it yearns, how it aches for its shepherd. What is faith without its guide, without the one who points to the mountain beyond the storm? Step back now, friends, and see the tapestry woven wide, China rising like a dragon, its shadow falling heavy across Russia's plains. The 2004 visit slipped through the cracks, a fleeting grace before the chains of geopolitics tightened. But by 2012, no chance, no whisper of mercy. Pipelines snaked east, billions in trade, $85 billion in 2012 alone, bound Russia to China's will, and Putin chose wealth over wonder, pragmatism over prayer. The life of man is of a mingled yarn, good and ill together, Shakespeare sighs across the centuries, and here the ill of greed strangles the good of spirit, choking it like ivy on a fragile vine. Why do we let borders and coins dictate the soul's path? Why do we bow to such small gods? The Dalai Lama, Nobel Prince of Peace, becomes a pawn in this cruel game. Russia bends to China's frown, and Kalmykia's prayers fade to whispers on the wind. Isn't it maddening? Isn't it a wound that festers in the heart? A man who teaches happiness is not something ready-made. It comes from your own actions, is barred by the actions of others, his voice silenced by the clatter of commerce. What freedom remains when power clots the air we breathe, when the world's dance turns to a dirge? Let's linger here, friends. In this swirling storm of history and heart, let's dive deep into the currents and feel the pull of life's great questions. That 2004 visit, wasn't it a glimpse of the eternal now, as Zen whispers in the stillness? The Dalai Lama, blessing the temple, wove Kalmykia's past pain into a fragile thread of future hope, and for 36 hours they tasted freedom's sweetness, a freedom that transcends the chains of time. But Putin missed it. Oh, he missed it. Lost. In his towers of control, blind to the light spilling across the steppe. Don't we all sometimes trade the sacred for the secure, the infinite for the immediate? We are here to laugh at the odds and live our lives so well that death will tremble to take us. Bukowski roars from the shadows, and Kalmykia laughed that day, a defiant, joyous laugh. Did Moscow even hear, or was it deafened by its own echoes? The non-visit of 2012, though, oh, what a void, what a hollow ache. It's the silence between notes that makes the music, they say, but this silence deafens. It presses down like a stone on the chest. Putin's choice to bar the Dalai Lama wasn't just politics. It was a rejection of wonder, a turning away from the mystery that calls us to look up, to look within. Why do we fear the wise? Why do we shrink from those who hold a mirror to our souls? Do they remind us of what we've lost? Our childlike trust, our openness to the unknown, the wild faith that once lit our eyes? The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Proust hums across the years, and Russia turned its eyes away, chose the familiar dark over the uncharted light. I feel the sting of it, don't you? Like salt in an open wound? Look at Putin now. What do you see? What do you feel? A ruler, yes, a man who bends nations to his will. But does he live? Truly live? I ache for him, trapped in his fortress of power, deaf to the Dalai Lama's call to let go, to release the self that clings so fiercely to its throne. Buddhism whispers, all suffering comes from clinging, a quiet truth that echoes through the ages. Yet Putin clings to power, to alliances, to the illusion of control that crumbles like sand in the end. Don't we all, in our small, quiet ways, cling to our own little kingdoms, afraid to step into the vastness? But the Dalai Lama, exiled yet free, laughs at such chains, laughs with a joy that pierces the dark, a joy that says, I am enough, and so are you. Who's the true king here, I ask you? Power or peace, the scepter or the smile? Which endures when the dust settles and the stars take back the sky? Kalmykia moves me to tears, tears of sorrow, tears of awe, tears that blur the line between the two. A people crushed, scattered, their faith torn from them like flesh from bone, yet rising again. Isn't this the essence of life, the raw, beating heart of what it means to be human? They built their temple, stone by stone, prayer by prayer, called their teacher across oceans and borders, defied the odds stacked high as mountains. The wound is the place where the light enters you. Rumi's truth shines here, a radiant beam cutting through the gloom of their past. But the wound festers when the healers kept away, when the one who points to the path is barred by gates of steel and fear. How long can they burn without fuel? How long can their flame dance against the wind? Their story begs us, screams to us. What do we fight for when the world turns cold, when the night presses in? I see them, those Kalmyk faces. Old women, with hands gnarled as roots, young boys with eyes wide as the steppe, gathered in 2004, drinking in the Dalai Lama's words like water after a drought. I see Ilyumzhinov, that odd, electric soul, pacing the sidelines, his mind a whirl of chess moves and cosmic visions, his heart tethered to a faith he refused to let die. I see Telo Tulku, holding the line through years of visa denials until the war broke him, 2022, when he fled, his voice trembling with grief for a Russia he could no longer call home. And I see the pilgrims, year after year, boarding buses and planes to India, their savings scraped together, their prayers carried in battered suitcases, 300 in 2010, and 600 in 2011, more still as the silence from Moscow grew louder. Don't you feel their longing, their unbreakable will? It's a fire that humbles me, that makes me question my own small battles. What would I endure? What would I cross for a truth I hold dear? And the world's game, China, Russia, the Dalai Lama. What a dance of shadows, what a tangled web we weave. Power flexes its muscles, faith bends like a reed in the storm, and humanity watches, caught between awe and despair. Man is condemned to be free, Sartre cries from the existential void, yet here freedom bows to necessity, to the clinking of coins and the hum of machinery. Isn't it absurd, absurd and heartbreaking, that a monk who preaches love, who walks the earth with nothing but a robe and a message, is feared by empires, while warlords shake hands over gold and gas? I feel the weight of it, friends, don't you? The crushing weight of a world that chooses chains over wings, that trades the infinite for the fleeting. China's rise in the 2000s, its dragon's breath warming Russia's economy, shifted the board. The 2004 visit slipped through before the pieces locked into place, a last gasp of grace. But by 2012, the game had changed. $85 billion in trade that year, a gas deal worth $400 billion by 2014, a partnership too rich to risk for a monk's smile. Putin pivoted east, away from the West's sanctions, away from the Dalai Lama's light, and Kalmykia's pleas were drowned in the roar of progress. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, born in 2001, tightened its grip. China's voice grew louder, its red lines sharper, and the Dalai Lama, Nobel laureate of 1989, became a liability, a wolf in monk's robes in Beijing's eyes. Russia mirrored that fear, barring him not just in 2012 but every year since 2004, a policy unbroken as of this day, March 11, 2025. Why do we let fear rule us? Why do we cower before the wise and bow to the ruthless? I see the Dalai Lama's face, lined with years of exile yet radiant with a peace that defies the world's chaos. My religion is kindness, he says, a simple creed that shames the complexity of our cowardice. And I see Putin, his eyes, hard as flint, his hands steady on the levers of power. Does he ever pause? Ever wonder what lies beyond the next move, the next victory? Let's stretch this tale wider, deeper. Let's wander through the corners of this story that whisper truths we might otherwise miss. Think of Kalmykia's history. Not just 2004, not just the Soviet scars, but the centuries before. The Oirats, those Mongol kin, arrived in the 17th century. Nomads who pitched their tents by the Caspian Sea, who brought Tibetan Buddhism to Europe's doorstep. They were warriors once, fierce and free, until the Russian Empire swallowed them, until the Tsars tamed their wildness into submission. Then came the Bolsheviks, and Stalin. Oh, Stalin, who saw their faith as a threat, their difference as a dagger. The 1943 deportation wasn't just a policy, it was an erasure. 150,000 Kalmyks torn from their homes, stuffed into cattle cars, dumped in Siberia's ice. Half died, half, their bodies left in unmarked snow, their prayers unanswered. Yet they returned, trickling back in the 1950s after Stalin's death, rebuilding from nothing, their temples gone, their monks ghosts. Isn't that resilience a marvel? Doesn't it shake you to your core? By 1991, when the Soviet Union crumbled, the Dalai Lama came, twice in 91 and 92, walking among them like a promise kept, his voice a thread stitching their past to their present. Ilyumzhinov seized that thread, a young leader with a chess player's cunning and a mystic's heart. He rebuilt temples, invited the Dalai Lama again in 2004, turned Alista into a strange oasis of Buddhism and eccentricity. Chess City, his pet project, rose alongside the Golden Temple, white towers and prayer wheels side by side, a surreal blend of mind and spirit. Critics called him corrupt, a spendthrift who neglected roads for dreams, but oh, how he dreamed. Without him, would 2004 have happened? Would that light have pierced the dark? I wonder, don't you? What drives a man like that? What fuels a vision so bold it defies a nation's apathy? Now think of Putin in those years, 2004, his second term, a Russia clawing back from the chaos of the 90s, a man forging an image of iron will. The Chechen wars raged, the economy teetered, and he turned to China, to the east, to steady the ship. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization was young but growing, a counterweight to the West, and China's rise, oh how it rose, gave Putin a partner he couldn't spurn. The 2004 visit was a risk, a gamble he allowed but didn't embrace. Why stir Beijing's wrath for a monk's fleeting prayers? By 2012, he was back as president, the protests of 2011 still ringing in his ears, the West tightening its noose after Crimea in 2014. China became his lifeline. Oil, gas, trade, and the Dalai Lama became a ghost, a name unspoken in the Kremlin's halls. Lavrov, his foreign minister, laid it bare in 2014. He must abandon political activity, a condition unmet, a door slammed shut. Putin's rare nods to Buddhism, praising its humanistic values in 2013 to Buryat monks, feel hollow, a politician's platitude, not a seeker's cry. Does he ever sit alone, I wonder, in the Kremlin silence, and feel the weight of what he's forsaken? Or is he too far gone, too encased in the armor of power to hear the Dalai Lama's laugh, to heed the Buddha's whisper that all is impermanent, even empires, even thrones, and the Dalai Lama himself? Oh, what a figure he cuts against this gray tapestry. Born in 1935, a boy plucked from a Tibetan village to lead a nation, exiled in 1959 when China's boots crushed Lhasa's stones. He's walked the world since, India, Europe, America, spreading kindness like seeds on barren ground, winning the Nobel in '89 for a peace that shames the world's wars. He stepped down as Tibet's political head in 2011, handing the reins to others, but China still fears him. Why? Because his voice carries? Because his calm unnerves? Because he embodies what power cannot touch? My religion is very simple. My religion is kindness, he says, and oh, how that simplicity cuts through the noise. In 2004, he came to Kalmykia, not for Putin, not for politics, but for them, the faithful, the forgotten, the ones who saw in him a mirror of their own stubborn hope. Since then, he's watched from afar, his visa requests denied, his heart tied to Russia's Buddhists by threads of prayer. In 2014, he spoke of Putin, egocentric, self-centered, not with malice but with a sadness, a warning of a man lost to his own shadow. Doesn't that pierce you? Doesn't it make you wonder what we lose when we turn from such voices? He's 89 now. As of 2025, his steps slower, his exile long, yet his laugh still rings. Can you hear it, friends, across the miles? Let's weave this wider still. Think of Russia's Buddhists beyond Kalmykia, Buryatia, near Lake Baikal, where monasteries dot the hills, where Damba Ayushiv leads with a fierce loyalty to both the Dalai Lama and Moscow, a dance of balance I can barely fathom. Tuva, on the Mongolian border, where throat-singing blends with chants, where shamans and monks share the same windswept plains. Together, they're 700,000 souls, less than 1% of Russia's 144 million, dwarfed by Orthodox Christians at 70%, Muslims at 10%. Yet their faith pulls them to the Dalai Lama, their spiritual north, a pull Putin tolerates but never nurtures. Why so small a voice, I wonder? Why so faint a cry against the roar of the state? In 2010, 300 made the pilgrimage to India. In 2011, 600, numbers that grew as the silence from Moscow hardened. Imagine them. Farmers, teachers, grandmothers, saving kopecks, boarding rattling buses, flying on shaky planes, all to sit at his feet in Dharamsala's dust. Isn't that devotion a miracle? Doesn't it shame our own fleeting passions? I see them returning, their faces alight, their bags heavy with books and blessings, their hearts full of a peace they can't find at home. And I see Telotoku before his 2022 flight pleading with Moscow, "Let him come, let him teach," his voice breaking against the Kremlin stone. In 2012, he told Rediff.com, "It's China, always China," a lament that echoes still. When he left, condemning the Ukraine war, he spoke for Kalmykia's soul. "I cannot stay in a land that kills." And oh, how that cuts, how it bleeds into the present. Now let's stretch this tale to its edges. Think of the world beyond. Russia, beyond China. The Dalai Lama's exile mirrors others. Think of Tibetans scattered across India, Nepal, the West, their culture a diaspora of prayer wheels and faded thenkas. Think of other faiths crushed by power. Uyghurs in Xinjiang, Rohingya in Myanmar, silenced by the same logic that bars him here. Isn't it a pattern, a thread running through our human story? Wisdom crushed by fear, light dimmed by greed? I feel it, friends. A heaviness that settles in the bones. A question that gnaws. Why do we build walls when we could build bridges? Why do we choose the fist over the open hand? Russia's Buddhists, Kalmykia, Buryatia, Tuva, join that chorus, their small numbers belied by their vast spirit. They're a footnote in Putin's empire, a whisper against the orthodox roar, yet they endure, they reach, they dream. In 2004, they touched their dream, 36 hours of grace, but since then they've stretched across oceans, their faith a kite straining against the wind. Doesn't that move you? Doesn't it stir something deep, something primal? So here we stand on March 11th, 2025, gazing back at this tangled tale. No, Putin didn't summon the Dalai Lama to Kalmykia in 2004 or 2012 to ponder Buddhism's depths. Oh, how I wish he had. How I wish he'd sat in that golden temple, listening to the monk's soft voice unravel life's knots. The 2004 visit was Kalmykia's heartbeat, not Putin's hand, a fragile flare of light sparked by Ilyumzhinov's wild vision, blessed by the Dalai Lama's grace, allowed but not embraced by Moscow's cold nod. China's shadow fell soon after, and 2012 became a ghost, a hope crushed by ambition's weight, pipelines, trade, a dragon's roar drowning out a monk's whisper. Putin plays his game, a king on a board of nations, his pieces carved from steel, while the Dalai Lama, exiled yet unbound, offers a truth too bright for Moscow's dim halls. Be kind whenever possible. It is always possible, he says, a creed that shames the world's calculus. Kalmykia endures, a testament to the spirit's fire, its temple gleaming, its people praying. But oh, how it aches, how it longs for its guide, its shepherd, its mirror. The only way out is through, Frost murmurs, and through we must go, through the pain, the questions, the fleeting joys. What does this teach us, friends? What does it scream into the silence of our souls? That power fades, but faith flickers on, a stubborn ember in the dark. That life's dance is cruel, yet beautiful. Cruel in its chains, beautiful in its defiance. That we must choose. Will we lock out wisdom, wall ourselves in fear, or fling wide the gates, let the light pour in? I leave you with that on this day, this moment. A cry from the steppe, a call to live awake, to laugh at the odds, to love through the storm. The wind still blows across Kalmykia, carrying prayers unanswered yet undying. Can you hear it, friends? Can you feel it?